Welcome to the Responsibilities module of the RSO Required Leader Training. In this module, we'll cover issues related to risk management, off-campus events and travel, the Office of Student Conduct, Title IX, the Stop Campus Hazing Act, and the Clery Act. Early in the planning process, ask yourselves this important question. Does this event fit the mission and values of my organization and of UNLV? This fundamental question should guide you in the decision-making process as you proceed. If you can't advocate strongly for why your plans fall in line with these missions and the values, it's probably time to reevaluate and develop a new plan that does. First, we will start with risk management. What is risk management? Risk management is the process of identifying, analyzing, and mitigating potential risks. RSOs need to be aware of the potential risks of events you're planning and work to develop strategies to mitigate those risks. Risks can vary in type and scope, but must be accounted for in your planning processes. Risk management is important because the safety of your members, the UNLV community, and any person you interact with is very important. The key is to be proactive. Make sure that you're thinking ahead and putting in place all of the safety measures that you can ensure your event goes as smoothly and safely as possible. When considering the potential risks associated with your events, there are several factors that can inherently increase the likelihood of harm or loss and should be strongly considered in your decision making. These include traveling, the consumption of alcohol by participants, events with physical activities such as playing a sport or the use of a dunk tank, off-campus events, contracts or agreements with third-party vendors, the behavior of organization members at parties or social events, and fire or other life safety issues. This training will utilize a case study to demonstrate the steps of identifying and planning for risk, including identifying the hazards, assessing who might be harmed and how, evaluating the risks, developing and implementing a migration plan, and post-event assessment. A risk management matrix is a tool that allows you to assess the risk of an event by indexing the severity of harm against the likelihood that it may occur. In a perfect world, you would eliminate all risk when planning your events, but it isn't always possible. The goal of a risk management matrix is to help you identify risks and to maintain an acceptable level of risk. The top of this matrix asks you to identify the likelihood that negative outcomes may occur. The left side of the matrix then asks you to determine the severity of potential outcomes. As you identify each element of your planned event, use the matrix to identify the level of associated risk as either low, medium, high, or extremely high. For example, based on this chart, you identified that the likelihood of a negative outcome at your event falls in the seldom category and the severity of potential negative outcomes is marginal. Then, your level of risk as per the matrix is medium. If, however, you identify that the potential likelihood was frequent while the potential negative outcomes were critical, the matrix identifies your risk as extremely high. High-risk activities should be avoided whenever possible. For medium and low-risk events, methods to mitigate those risks should be identified and implemented. Let's talk through a risk management case study. Say your organization is planning an outdoor event on the rec center lawn to celebrate the start of the semester. Because the event will take place in a venue that is managed by Student Union and Event Services, referred to moving forward as SUS, you've been assigned an event coordinator to work with during the planning process and on the day of your event. A student member of your organization plans to DJ the event using sound equipment rented through and set up by SUS. Additionally, you plan to play lawn games, including cornhole and giant Jenga. You have also worked with a third-party, off-campus vendor to secure the use of an inflatable bounce house at the event. Based on this event, let's complete the risk mitigation plan together. On the first row, we list our student DJ as an event element. The SUS rented sound equipment and a table for the DJ will be placed under a pop-up canopy provided by your organization. What are the potential associated risks? Though you plan to locate the DJ as close as you can to a power outlet, the cords still have to be run a short way through the grass, so there is a risk that someone could trip, fall, and injure themselves on the electrical cords. In addition, pop-up canopies have the potential to lift and blow away in high winds, which could cause injury and mild property damage. Based on the risk matrix, we've identified that the trip hazard of the power cords, as well as the risk of the pop-up canopy blowing away in high winds, both present a medium level of risk. To reduce these risks, we plan to mitigate them by placing the DJ stand as close to a power outlet as possible and then covering the cords that run from the outlet to the sound equipment with cable guards or brightly colored cones. In addition, the RSO plans to provide sandbags to weigh down the legs and the feet of the canopy to reduce the possibility it could be picked up by high winds. We've also developed a backup plan that will not set up a pop-up canopy if the winds are high the day of the event, or will take the canopy down if the winds pick up too much. The next element of the event is the inflatable bounce house that is being rented by a third-party off-campus vendor. Individuals who are jumping in the bounce house risk minor injuries such as a sprained ankle. Again, wind could be a factor in this event, which are dangerous with inflatable bounce houses as they can be picked up and blown across the field, posing the risk of a more serious injury if anyone is inside at the time. The rental is inflated via a small generator, which could also pose the risk of guests inhaling fumes from the gas that powers the generator. Based on the risk matrix, we identified that the risk of injury from use of the bounce house, as well as fume inhalation, both pose medium levels of risk. The potential of high winds that blows the bounce house over poses a high risk. To reduce this risk, we plan to follow all safety guidelines provided by the bounce house vendor. Ahead of the event, we'll provide a copy of the inflatable vendor's certificate of liability insurance that meets the requirements provided by our SU's event coordinator. The vendor is required to provide heavy weights for the bounce house to reduce the risk of it blowing over. We will also plan to supervise the load-in and setup of the bounce house with our event coordinator on site to ensure the vendor follows the agreed-upon safety protocols. The generator will be placed in an area with open ventilation, and a wide circle of brightly colored cones will be placed around it to ensure participants don't stand too close to the exhaust fumes. Lastly, we identify now that our backup plans, if winds are determined to be high, is to not utilize the bounce house. The next event element on our risk mitigation plan is the outdoor lawn games that include cornhole and giant Jenga. Potential risks include the possibility that the Jenga pieces fall on a participant or that someone could be hit by a beanbag from the cornhole game. Based on our risk matrix, we identified that the risk of these is low. To mitigate the risk, we plan to place these games on an area of the field that doesn't encourage guests to walk through it to get to other event elements. The last event on our risk mitigation plan is related to the heat early in the fall semester, which we know could cause heat exhaustion or dehydration. Based on the risk matrix, we identify that the level of risk is low. Plans to reduce risk include providing water to attendees. In addition, organizers will keep note of anyone who looks like they may be feeling the negative effects from the heat and bring them inside to sit down in the SRWC lobby until they cool off. It's important to note that because we've identified this event does have several elements where risk exists, all participants are required to sign a liability waiver. Once signed, each attendee will be given a wristband so event organizers can identify that they've completed the required waiver. We'll come back to liability waivers in detail more soon. So it's the day of your event, you're all set up and ready to go. 30 minutes before your event is scheduled to start, you notice that the weather has turned. The sun that was shining has now disappeared, clouds have rolled in, and the wind is gusting very strong, maybe even as much as 30 or 40 miles per hour. The vendor already set up your bounce house, as per all the safety regulations, and you'll be obligated to pay for it whether you use it or not. Now here's the question. Should you continue with your plans and allow participants to use that bounce house? Again, think about our earlier point on identifying risk not only beforehand, but throughout the full event. What may have seemed like a smart idea early on may not be a smart idea now. The answer to that question is no. The change in weather means that the risk is now too high to continue with the original plan. Someone could be seriously injured if that bounce house were to be picked up and rolled across the lawn because of the strength of the wind. Sometimes, being the leader in your student organization includes making difficult choices. It's possible that everyone knows that the bounce house is going to be there, they're excited to utilize it, you know they're going to pay whether you use it or not, but the best choice you can make as a leader in that moment is the difficult one, to not utilize it. Next, we'll talk about liability waivers. If you identify any possible risk associated with your event, All participants must complete a liability waiver. RSOs must use the standard template provided by UNLV Risk Management and General Counsel. Templates are available on the Student Involvement and Activities website at the link listed below. RSO leaders are expected to store signed liability waivers for 4 years post-event. Some common activities that should always utilize liability waivers include anything that includes off-campus travel, rental of inflatables, physical activities or games, handling any chemicals, or etc. Really think through the planned activities for your event. The liability waiver needs to inform all participants of the potential risks associated with the event. As per the RSO manual, student organizations are considered separate entities from UNLV and may not act as an extension of the institution. Student organizations do not have the authority to represent UNLV and are not able to sign contracts with off-campus venues or third-party vendors on behalf of the institution. Faculty and staff advisors are also not permitted to sign any contracts or agreements as representatives of UNLV on behalf of your organization. Should a member of your organization choose to enter into a contract or agreement as a representative of your RSO, any individual who signs that contract may be personally held responsible for the contract, indebtedness, obligations, and liabilities. This means that the responsibility to uphold the contract, pay for the agreement, and assume any liability falls on the organization and the students who signed the contract and not on UNLV. Students who do choose to enter into these agreements are advised to do so under extreme caution and care for the written content of the agreement. If your RSO is part of a national organization, it's recommended that you consult with representatives from the national level before entering into any agreements on behalf of this organization. UNLV has adopted new guidelines for RSOs related to off-campus events and travel, so please pay attention as the next few slides may be new information. These guidelines are designed to promote student safety. An event is considered an RSO event if social media and other marketing indicate it's an RSO event, if a significant number of attendees are members of the RSO, if you're using an RSO funding received through a university funding process or RSO-generated funds in an RSO commercial bank account for the event, if others could reasonably infer it's an RSO event based on an event signage, participant attire, or social media. Meaning, if students post about an RSO ski trip, it's an RSO ski trip, not a group of students that went skiing that happen to all be members of the RSO. Same thing if people post about an RSO party. So if it looks like an RSO event, it's an RSO event. Off-campus events should be held at venues that allow entry to persons of any age, so this would exclude any locations that require all individuals to be 21 or older to enter. This makes the event more inclusive and also ensures requirements for having food and non-alcoholic options are met. When engaging in a high-risk activity such as rock climbing, skydiving, or axe throwing, use a reputable, licensed business that has insurance for the activity and trains professionals who ensure adequate safety measures are in place. To ensure student safety and to help manage the risks, RSOs should use a reputable, licensed company for any activities that require training, expertise, and safety equipment. For example, if you plan a ski trip, you should utilize a licensed ski resort and follow all resort rules such as skiing and bounds. The maximum occupancy for any indoor and outdoor spaces need to be observed, and RSOs need to have a way to manage access to events in which more individuals may want to enter than fire and safety guidelines allow. Please keep in mind that the Student Conduct Code applies to all RSO activities, whether they occur on or off campus. Alcohol at events increases the risk for the events. For events with alcohol, RSOs should utilize a third-party vendor that is responsible for checking identification of participants and serving alcohol in accordance with state and federal regulations and laws. RSOs must not permit, encourage, coerce, glorify, or participate in any activities involving the rapid consumption of alcohol, such as drinking games. As a reminder, RSO events held on campus must follow the UNLV Alcohol Events Policy and must receive prior approval from the Vice President for Student Affairs. Travel is another activity that increases the risks, so RSOs need to take steps to minimize the risks associated with travel. One student who is traveling with the group must be designated as the trip leader that is responsible for ensuring safety protocols are followed and maintains a roster of trip participants, copies of liability waivers, and emergency contact information, and also enacts emergency procedures. Liability waivers must be completed by all individuals traveling. It's suggested that RSOs create a Google Drive of travel itinerary and liability waivers that is accessible to members on the trip, but also to a responsible person not going on the trip, so that if an emergency occurs, there are multiple people that can access the needed information. International travel must be coordinated through the UNLV Office of International Programs and may have additional requirements. RSOs are encouraged to fly with a licensed commercial airline or rent a bus, van, or large vehicle with a fully licensed professional driver. Utilizing professional travel services reduces risk. Travel by private vehicle has many risks that need to be managed. Individuals utilizing their own vehicle to transport others and individuals driving others need to be aware of the personal liability. Any parking fines, motor vehicle infractions, or other liability charges are the personal liability of the driver. All private vehicles must have insurance covered as required by law. All students who operate vehicles during travel are required to have a valid U.S. driver's license for the vehicle being driven with appropriate classifications, restrictions, and/or endorsements. All vehicles must have a responsible person in the front passenger seat to assist with navigation. This navigator is expected to remain awake at all times. Drivers must not use cell phones while driving unless a hands-free device is used. Trips requiring more than 10 hours of driving time round trip must include overnight lodging. For trips more than 350 miles each way, 2 valid drivers are required per vehicle, and the drivers must rotate every 3 to 5 hours. Driving overnight is prohibited. Itineraries may not include more than 1 hour of drive time between midnight and 6 a.m. Even with a solid risk management plan, sometimes accidents, incidents, or injuries occur. In this next section, we will cover RSO responsibilities should there be an emergency. What should you do if an incident occurs at one of your events? First and foremost, take immediate care of any injuries, medical issues, or other safety emergencies. This could range from getting ice for a participant who rolled their ankle to calling 911 for a life-threatening medical incident, fire, or auto incident. The next step will be to document the incident in as much detail as possible. Create a written record of exactly what happened. Be sure to get accounts for all who were involved. Document the incidents with pictures and/or video when appropriate. In addition, the incident should be reported to UNLV. If it's during business hours, you can contact the Student Involvement and Activities Office at 702-895-5631. Outside of business hours, contact the UNLV Police Services non-emergency line at 702-895-3668. Be prepared to provide a detailed account when reporting. A written report must be emailed to involvement@unlv.edu within 12 hours of the incident. If it's a serious incident, be sure to call UNLV as soon as you're able to and send the email of written information as soon as possible. In this next section, we'll talk about the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities. The Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities, also known as the OSRR, promotes the awareness of student and student organizations' rights and responsibilities. The Student Conduct Code can be found online at unlv.edu/student conduct. It's important to note that anywhere in the student conduct where it refers to a student, it actually reads student/student organization. That means that all of the rights and responsibilities an individual student has listed in the code also applies to your student organization. Any student or student organization may be held accountable for the actions of any of its members if the violation of the code is any way related to the organization. Organization misconduct does not need to be officially sanctioned by the entire membership to be considered grounds for possible conduct action towards the organization. Remember that the actions of even one of your members can have an impact on your entire organization if they're acting on behalf of your organization. The University of Nevada, Las Vegas defines hazing as any method of initiation into a group performed by someone on or off campus that endangers another individual, destroys or removes public or private property, or subjects someone to mental or physical requirements, requests, or obligations that endanger another individual, could cause discomfort, pain, fright, disgrace, injury, or that is personally degrading or violates any federal, state, local law, or university policy. An instance only has to meet one of these definitions in order for it to be considered hazing, not all of them, just one. Also, the willingness to participate in hazing does not make the conduct acceptable or legitimate. The line of what does and doesn't constitute hazing can sometimes be hard to discern. If you're not sure if something is considered hazing, start by asking yourself these questions. Would I still participate if my family were watching? Am I expected to keep these activities a secret? Is this illegal or does it violate UNLV policies? Does this violate my personal values or those of the organization and/or UNLV? Is this causing emotional or physical distress to myself or others? Would we worry about the consequences if a UNLV administrator saw what is happening? Often, just the pause and need to ask yourself these questions may be what tells you that something isn't right. Hazing occurs on a spectrum that is centered around two principles, recognition and frequency, and three actions, intimidation, harassment, and violence. There's a wide range of behaviors that fit the definition of hazing. For this reason, it can often go unrecognized and unreported. The spectrum of hazing illustrates the reality that most violent forms of hazing, such as forced consumption of alcohol, drugs, or vile substances or beating, occur at a low frequency but are highly recognized, whereas intimidation hazing, such as demeaning names or expecting items to always be in one's possession, or harassment hazing, which includes verbal abuse or sleep deprivation, happens far more frequently and are often not recognized as harmful hazing behaviors. Increasing the awareness of these low recognition, high frequency intimidation and harassment forms of hazing can reduce our community's tolerance of such behaviors and shift the culture towards more positive, less harmful ways of welcoming new members into your organizations and engaging with existing members. Remember that the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities is here as a resource for you. Reach out to OSRR to request a training for your student organization members. Remember that if something your organization is doing gives you reason to pause, listen to your instincts. If you're not sure if the activity represents a positive choice for your organization, don't hesitate to reference the conduct code or reach out to the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities. Information about OSRR can be found online. Next, we're going to talk about the Patsy T. Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act, also known as Title IX. Title IX of the Education Amendments Act of 1972 states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Title IX provides gender equality in athletics, prohibits gender-based discrimination of students and employees of the university, and prohibits sex discrimination, including sexual harassment and sexual violence. UNLV prohibits gender discrimination in any form, including sexual harassment of or violence towards students, faculty, or staff. UNLV requires all students, faculty, and staff to comply with this policy. UNLV also designated a department to coordinate efforts to comply with Title IX mandates, provide supportive measures, and investigative complaints, known as the Office of Equal Employment in Title IX. You can also find them online at unlv.edu/compliance. Gender discrimination is the unequal or disadvantaged treatment of an individual or group based on their gender, but not necessarily sexual in nature. This includes discrimination based on sex, gender identity, or gender expression. There are many examples of discrimination that are listed here, but the one we really want to point out is what's bolded: extracurricular activities. Anybody who takes part in a student organization on campus is part of an extracurricular activity and is therefore required to follow the mandates of Title IX. What is sexual harassment? It's defined as unwelcome conduct on the basis of sex that is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it effectively denies a person equal access to the institution's education program or activity. It can include, but is not limited to, sexual advances, sexual assaults, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct of sexual nature. Sexual harassment can be based on an individual's perception of the event in question. This is very important to note. If the conduct is unwelcome and offensive to the person experiencing it, then it can be considered sexual harassment regardless of whether or not it was intended that way. It doesn't matter if it was only meant to be a joke or if someone didn't intend for someone to be hurt by it. If that individual who is experiencing it finds it to be unwelcome and offensive, then it may be considered sexual harassment. What is your responsibility? Everyone on campus is responsible for preventing sexual harassment and ensuring that organizations you are part of are free from harassment. It's also your responsibility to become informed about what constitutes sexual harassment, as well as bystander interventions to prevent it. We also encourage you to evaluate your own behavior to ensure that you're not engaging in sexual harassment. As a leader in your student organization, it's your responsibility to create an environment where sexual harassment and violence are not tolerated in any form. It is also your duty to report violations on campus when you are aware of them. If you believe that you or another individual on campus have been the victim of sexual harassment, including sexual assault, violence, or other sexual misconduct or gender discrimination in any form, you are encouraged to report it. There are several ways in which you can report sexual harassment, violence, or misconduct. You can reach out to the Office of Equal Opportunity in Title IX, including filing an online report form available at unlv.edu/compliance, the Office of Student Conduct, Police Services, Housing and Residential Life, the Care Center, Student Involvement Activities, or any other UNLV faculty or staff member. Note that all UNLV faculty or staff members, excluding those covered by a doctor's privilege or serving as legal counsel, are considered mandatory Title IX reporters. This means that if you tell your advisor about something that has occurred, by law they are required, unless they are covered by a doctor's privilege or legal counsel, to report that back to the university. Should this happen, the university's Title IX coordinator would contact you to offer supportive measures. An important resource for you to know about is the Care Center. The Care Center provides free and confidential support services, holistic healing workshops, campus education, and awareness events for UNLV, NSC, and CSN communities impacted by sexual assault, relationship abuse, family violence, and/or stalking. Programs and services are available to people of all identities regardless of status. Care advocates can assist in the process of working through feelings, identifying needs, and making decisions. Note that services are available even if the event occurred off campus and regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. If you or someone you know has been harmed, please call the Care Line. Next, we're going to discuss the Jean Cleary Disclosure of Campus Security Policy and Campus Crime Statistics Act, also known as the Cleary Act. What is the Cleary Act? Unfortunately, the Cleary Act has a pretty sad story associated with it. The Cleary Act is named after Jean Cleary, who was sexually assaulted and murdered in her dorm room by another student at Lee University in 1986. After her death, her parents discovered that there was a high rate of violent crime at Lee and that this information was not disclosed to the public. Her parents were adamant that had Jean known of the crime rate, she would have been more cautious on campus. In response, her parents lobbied Congress to enact legislation. The Cleary Act requires institutions of higher education to disclose crime statistics to current and prospective students and employees to ensure that they are informed about campus crimes and to allow them to make informed decisions. This federal policy mandates that the compilation and disclosure of campus crime statistics and requires the collection of information regarding incidents from non-law enforcement agents known as campus security authorities. The Cleary Act requires colleges and universities to disclose certain information about campus crimes and security policies. Institutions that fail to meet these requirements can be fined and lose federal funding. As students on campus, you see this through regular email reports of crime statistics on campus, which are available online at unlv.edu/police/crime log. Publication of the Annual Security and Fire Safety Report, and timely warnings and emergency alerts regarding crimes or imminent hazards that have occurred on or near campus. Some of the crimes that must be reported include aggravated assault, burglary, homicide, hate crimes, motor vehicle theft, robbery, both forcible and non-forcible sex crimes, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, drug and liquor violation, and illegal possessions of weapons. Note that this is not an exhaustive list. A full list of required crimes to be reported can be found on the clearycenter.org website. An incident involving any member of the UNLV community must be reported. When in doubt, we encourage you to report to the university. Let's talk a little more in depth about campus security authorities, which I'll refer to as CSAs. CSAs have a federally mandated responsibility to report any Clery Act offenses to the institution. In addition to campus police and security officials, the law defines CSAs as any official with significant responsibility for student and campus activities. Under this definition, all of your RSO advisors are considered CSAs and have a mandatory duty to report. As part of the registration process, all RSO advisors must complete a mandatory online CSA training, as well as complete the advisor agreement form, which acknowledges their role as a CSA. What is your responsibility as an RSO leader? As an officer or member of your organization, it's important that you lead by setting a strong example of reporting. As a member of the UNLV community, you have a responsibility to your fellow students to make sure that they are aware of any risk of crime based on what has already occurred. Report as soon as you're aware of an alleged crime so a timely warning can be sent to the campus community. Who can you report to? If the person reporting the crime is in immediate danger or harm, call 911 or use your Rebel Safe app to be connected directly to the UNLV dispatcher. Other reporting avenues include UNLV Police Services, the Office of Student Conduct, the Office of Equal Employment and Title IX, Housing and Residential Life, the Care Center, Student Involvement and Activities, and your RSO advisor. All CSA reports should be forwarded to the UNLV's Clery Compliance Coordinator. Reports can be made online.